In this video, we are going to discuss array processing in structured programming, right? So there are two parts of this lesson. So this is the first part, that is introduction to arrays, right? Okay. So first of all, let's see what is an array, right? So an array is a data structure which can be used to store a collection of elements, or in other words, we say a collection of data of the same type, right? That means if you want to store, say, a set of integers, we can define a value, array, right? So if you want to store a set of strings or characters, we can define an array, right? So if you want to store both a set of numbers or integers and characters, so you can't store those two data types in same array, right? So you have to define two different arrays, right? Because in an array we can store only same data types, right? So we can store the values which are in a same data type, right? So now we know array is a data structure that can store a collection of elements, or we call data of the same type, right? So all the array elements occupy a continuous memory locations, right? So when we create variables, they allocate memory location in random places which are not continuous, all right? So but in array, all the elements occupy a continuous memory locations, and the size of the array is fixed. That means once if you create an array of the size 10, that size is fixed, we can't change it, all right? So we call this is not a dynamic, right? Size is not a dynamic, we call size is static, all right? So in other words, we call size a size of the array is fixed, all right? And a specific element in an array can be accessed by an index, all right? So all elements have their own index. It means index is unique for within a one array, all right? So for example, so let's see, in this array, right? So we have, say, in here we have three elements, right? So this is designed for storing five elements, right? So indexing start from 0, 1, 2, 0, right? So if you want to access this particular element or element 1, so we can access by using the relevant index, all right? So I told you that the index starting from 0, so the element 1 can be referred as a index 0. So this is element 2. The element 2 can be accessed using its index, that is index number 1, right? So likewise, we can access a specific element in an array by using their own index, right? And then let's see how to declare an array in C programming, all right? So we have to specify two main things, right? So it says to specify the type of the elements, or we call data type, and the number of the elements, we call the size of the element. So when you declare an array, we have to specify what is the data type and then the size of the array, right? Like this, right? First of all, we have to mention the data type, and then we can have a array name, right? So in other words, we call identifier, right? So now we know what are the rules for labeling the identifiers, right? So then we have to follow those rules. So after the identifier, we can specify the size of the array within square bracket, right? Within square bracket. So after declaration, we have to put semicolon. All right. So in here, a data type must be an any valid data type in C programming, and the array size must be an integer constant, right? So we can't mention this the size of the array by using, say, a double or float value. So for example, so 5.5, 6.5, likewise, right? So it should be an integer constant. Constant means the, as I told earlier, the size of the array is fixed. We can't change it. All right. So then the size of the array size is it's a constant value. All right. So and it must be an integer, All right. So for example, so in here I declare an array of the data type integer, and then the name of the array is marks, and the size of the array is 5. All right. So in here we declare an array named by marks. So that's the array name. And then so the data type is integer. All right. So integer is mentioned as int, and then the size of the array is 5. That means we can store 5 integers in this within this array. All right. So it can hold 5 integer values. All right. Okay. And then the next one is the comparison between arrays and the variable, right? So you know how to declare a variable. So let's see, if you want to store 5 numbers, right? 5 numbers, then I have to declare 5 integer variables, right? So in say num1, in num2, num3, num4, num5, so right. So let's see how these memory locations are allocated. So for example, so num1 is allocated from and this space, right? So num2 in another different space, right? Num3 in another free space, right? So num4 from another free space. Num5 is from another free space, right? So these memory allocations are not in continuous memory locations, right? So at that time, if there is a free space, so that space is allocated for the defined variable, right? So in here, I have declared 5 integers, right? So namely num1 to num5. So if you want to store 5 integer values, right? So no need to declare 5 variables separate like this. So for example, if you want to say store or say 100 values, then if you use variables, so we have to declare 100 variables, right? So, but rather than declaring 100 values or 100 variables, we can declare an array, right? So of the type integer. So like this, right? So in here I'll declare an array, right? So namely say num, right? So this is how we declare array int num, right? So in here I want to store 5 values. So therefore I declare an array of the size 5. All right, so let's see how these memory locations, how memory allocated for this array, right? So as I told at the beginning, right? So memory allocation for the array is continuous locations, right? So in here, these continuous memory locations are allocated for the array, right? So these locations, so in these elements are referred by using their index, right? So index always starting from 0 and then goes 1 to 0. All right. So see if there is if there are 5 values, right? So the last index is 4, right? Like that, right? So this is the difference between arrays versus variable, right? It is easy to, and then it's uh, time consumed, so that we can save time for processing, right? So we can declare an array rather than declaring separate variables, right? Okay, and then let's see how to initialize arrays, right? So an array can be initialized either one by one or using a single statement, right? So there are two methods, one by one, or we can say we can assign values or to the array one by one, or you can assign values using a single statement, right? So this is the method one. So in here I use a single statement, right? So int marks, the size of the marks is 5, right? And then in here we can assign the values, we can store values, right? Or since there are 5 values in the here, so no need to specify the size, right? So it automatically take the size of the array is 5, because in here we have 5 values, right? So since the size of the array is fixed, right? So if there are 10 values, so the size of the array is taken as 10, all right? So no need to specify, all right? So this is a second initialization method, right? So we can declare an array, and then after that, by using the index of an element, right? So we can assign values one by one like this, right? So in here, we assign value or the number 50 to the index 0, 60 to the index 1, 40 to the index 2. Likewise, we can assign one by one, right? So how these memory locations are allocated, right? So if you use a single statement, right? So the memory allocation, right? Even you use the one by one assign method, right? So this is the memory allocations, right? So there is no difference between the memory allocations, right? So only difference between the initialization method, right? Okay, and then let's see how to access elements, how to accessing array elements, right? Again, we can use the index of element, all right? So as I said earlier, right, index starting from 0 and then goes 1, 2, 3, 4, something like that, right? So an element is accessed by indexing the array name, right? So for example, if you say marks and then within a square bracket 1, so that is 60, right? So array have 0 as the first index, that is not 1, right? So always the indexing or the index starting from 0 in C programming, right? So in this example, mark 0 is the first element, marks 0th element, right? So in here, yeah, there's small mistake. It should be marks, right? The array name is marks, all right? Okay, like this, right? Marks, because here the name of the array is marks, right? So in here, marks 0 is the first element. And then if the size of an array is n, generally, then the last element is n minus 1, because indexing starting from 0, not 1. Then the last element is n minus 1, right? Okay, so in this example, the last element is marks, index is 4, right? Because the indexing starting from 0, right? Okay, and then suppose an array is declared 5 elements, right? So we can declare array like this. So it can be accessed the array elements from marks index 0 to marks index 4, right? So what will happen if you access marks 7, right? Since there are 5 elements, the last index is 4, right? So if you say mark 7, that index is not that element is not available, all right? So this may cause unexpected output, right? Because this element is not available, right? So sometimes it will be give an error, sometimes it may be go through the program without any error, right? Anyway, so it should never access the element of an array outside of its bound, right? So what is the bound? So in this example, the number of elements are 5, then the bound is, the last element is 4. So that is the last element. So we can't go out from this bound. We call array out of bound. Array index is out of bound, right? So here, if you say mark 7, that is out of bound, right? So this is go to mark 0 to marks 4. 4 is the last element. So we can't say marks 5, right? So for fifth element is not available in here, or the index fifth. Actually, the index number 5 is not available in this array, because in here indexing starting from 0, the last element is 4, right? And then if you want to change the value of an array elements, again we can use indexing, all right? So we can use indexing. So if you want to change value of an array elements, right? So in here, right? So in here, now I'm going to make the value of the third element to -1, right? So third element to -1. So what is the third element? So this is the first element. So this is the second element. So this is the third element, right? So third element means the index number 2, right? So we can assign -1, the value -1 to the third element by using its index, right? So its index is 2, right? So in here, so once if you change the third element as -1, then the organization of the array is something like this, right? So now let's see how to make the value of the fifth element to 0, right? I'm going to change the fifth element as 0, right? So currently the fixed element is 60, right? So now this is my array. So this is my current array. Now the fifth element of the array is 0, right? So if you change the fifth element, so we can use the index number 4, right? So these marks index number 4, right? So again there is a small mistake, right? So in here the array declaration as marks, right? So when you change the values, you have to use say marks, right? Okay, so for that, and then in here I make the fifth element as 0, so we can assign the number 0 as the fifth element. So fifth element means the index number 4, right? Index number 4, right? So in here now this is the so if it is the so this is the original array, right? So in here once if you change the third element to -1, this is the organization. So if you change this one, not this one, right? So if you change this array, right? So in here I assign 0 as a fifth element, then the 0 is there, right? So like this we can change the value of an array by using their index, right? So by using their index, we can change the array element, right? So we can see, let's see how to output element from an array, right? So how to print the first element of the array, right? So if you want to print the first element, so we can use the print command, print, and then so since this is integer array, so we can specify the data type as integer by using the %d, and then so this is the first element, right? So first element is represented by the 0th index, right? So if you want to print the third element of the array, the third element means index number 2, right? So this is the data type specification %d, and then here we can print the third element, right? So in generally, if you want to print the ith element of the array, right? So we can say print, and then the data type is integer. So we can specify integer like this, format D, and then so this is the ith element, marks I-1, right? In generally, if it is the first element, the index is 0. Third element, index is 2. If it is fifth element, index is 4. If it is ith element, index is I-1, right? So like this, we can output the element from an array, right? So if you want to input elements to array, if you want to input elements to the array, all right? So let's, before that, let's see how to do these things in our do C++ program, right? Okay. So let's see how to declare an array and then how to print the value or print the elements from an array, right? So when you declare an array, right? So when you declare an array, there are two methods, right? So initialization one by one and then single statement. Let's see, right? Okay, then I'll start the program using the include header file, standard input output header file, and then I use say int main, right? Int main like this. I declare array say int marks. All right, so this is the array declaration. Then the size of the array is say 5. right? Like this. So there are two initialization, right? So if in here I assign values say one by one. So since the size of the array is 5, so I can assign values like this, right? So I don't use the same values which are in my presentation. I assign few values randomly like this, right? So in here I assign the value for the first element, that is for the 0th index. So this is for index number 1, and then this one is say marks say index number 2, right? So that is say 75, and then say marks the index number 3, right? So then I assign 80, right? Marks and index number 4, that is say 65, like this, right? So in here I assign uh, 5 elements to the marks array, and then I save this one as I have a folder called arrays inside the uh, test program, right? So I save this one as a first program, first.c, all right? Okay, then I compile this, all right? Execute, compile, right? I already compiled by using the shortcut F9, and then I can execute. Right? So in here, there is no output, right? So this is first method to initialization array, right? And then if you want, you can print these values, all right? So by using the printf command, all right? So we have to specify the data type is say integer, and then after the output, I go to the next line, and then I print the values by using index 0. All right. So for example, in here, I output the first element, yeah, like this. First element is say 60. So that is the first element, right? So this is the first element of my array. So likewise, if you want, you can output the next element or the second element, or in other words, the index number 1, right? So percentage and slash n to go to the next line of the printing marks 1, right? Like this. Likewise, we can output any element by using their index, right? Like this. Like this, I can output. Just copy these statements. So time saving. So in your case, just you have to type this. So this is the 0th index, index number 1, and then next one is index number 2, and then next number is say index number 3, and then next one is index number 4. Likewise, we can output the element from the array. I compile it, and then I execute. Now we can have all the elements from the array. We can output all the elements from the array, right? So we can initialize the elements at single statement, right? So like this. So I use the same source code, right? So I use the same source code and then save 2.c, all right? And then so this is my array declaration, right? So at the same time, I'll assign the array elements. So 65, say 95, I use just random values, right? So say 75. So in here, 5 elements, right? 3, 5, right? So the same methods can be used to output the elements, all right? Then I compile this, all right? So in here, yeah, after the initialization, I output semicolon, all right? And then run. Right. So in here we have a output of this array. That means this initialization is okay, right? Just I remove the size of the array, right? Because in here I initialization is done at same statement, right? Then I compile this and execute, right? So there is no error. That means, so without specifying the size of the array, we can assign values at one statement, right? So because in here number of elements are can be identified, right? So this is the initialization and output the values, all right? So in here, so I can change the values. So for example, if I change the value, say now in here I change the says second index, the value of the second index. So that is 95. Then in here I change this one as say 150. Right. Then I'll change another index, say marks, say index number 4. So that's the last element, the fifth element. So I assign the value, say now it's 75. Say I use say minus 20. Minus. So if you want, you can assign minus what you say I assign 50. Then I can print those values again, right? So in here after the change values, right? So after the change in the values, right? So if you want, you can print after changing the values of the array, right? Like this. Right. So in here I compile this and run this. Right now you can see after change in the values, right? So in here, yeah, actually in here after changing the value, so this is the message. I put /n, then it will go to the next line, right? Compile this, and then after compilation, I run this, right? So now you can see the after initialization, the first element is 50, the next one 65, the next one 95, next one 85, the last one 75. Then in here I change the index number 2. 2 means here third element, that is 95. So 95 is changed as 150. Now you can see, right? 95 has been a change at 150. Or in other words, 150 come to the second index. So the 95 is replaced by 150, right? And then the fourth element or the last element change as 50. So 75 replaced by 50. Here, now you can see those two values are assigned to the relevant indexes. All right. Okay. Likewise, we can change the values of the array by using their index. All right. So we can initialize the value, and then we can access the value, and then we can change the value. All right. And then we can output the value as well. All right. So I it's one thing that is once if you access the elements which are out of bound, right, which are exceed the final index. All right. So let's see. Right. So again, I take the same source code. Right. So I save this one as the third program 3.c. All right. So I just remove this set of code. So in here, so after the fourth index, right? So in here, fifth indexes are there. All right. So in here, I'm going to access the index number 10. All right. So since there are 5 elements, so in here I access 10th index. All right. So we know that the 10th index is not there, right? So yeah, in here, once if you access 10th index, so the output this particular value. So this is not in our array, right? So this is incorrect, right? So they will output the incorrect value, right? So likewise, we can't access the array out of bound. Indexes are out of bound. We can't access that. So in here we can access only indexes from 0 to 4. All right. Okay. So that's about the accessing array elements, right? So we change the value and then we output the element. Then let's see how to input elements to the array. How to input elements to the array, right? So in here, we do this. We did this. All right. So output the value and then how to input elements to the array, right? So write a new program, separate program, right? So let's say input. So let's see, I'll explain how to input an array, to input elements to the array, right? So if you want to input the element and store in the second element, right? So if it is second element, index is 1, right? Then, so since assume the array is integer, since that array is integer, the input value is integer. Then we can use the scanf function like in variable inputs, right? So here we have to specify the data type, that is integer, and then here we have to specify the address of the relevant element, right? So if it is the second element, the address is, the index is 1, then the address is represented by this n%, n, and then here this is the array marks, and then first index, right? So generally, if you want to store in ith element, if you want to input the integer value and store it in the ith element, right? So we can use the scanf function, scanf. So since that value is integer, we can specify the integer value like this, %d, and then if it is ith element, right? Then the index is I minus 1. We can specify the address and of the marks I minus 1. So likewise, we can store values in an array. All right. So let's see how to do that, right? We know how to output elements, right? So here, first of all, I import the standard input output file, all right? And then int main. So this is my main function, right? Okay. And then I declare array, say int marks, all right? So the size of the array is 5. Now I'm going to store 5 integer values in my array, 5 integer values, all right? So let's take one by one, all right? So first of all, I'll output the message, say enter marks or enter number 1, right? So first number or the marks 1, all right? So after the statement, we have to end up with the semicolon. So how can we store? Scanf function, and then within double quotation, we have to specify the type, that is integer, and then we have to specify the we have to set the address of the first element. N% means address, and the array name is marks, and then first element is 0th index. So like this we can store values, right? After storing it, we can check it by printing the 0th index, or in other words, first element, all right? So type is integer, and then first index is 0, right? Okay. Save this on as a fourth program 4.c, and then I compile this. So compile and then run this. Okay. Enter number 1. Just say 65. Then once if you print this 0th index, we have 65 as a output. So likewise, we can input numbers to the any index by using the index value. All right. So I use the say next output message is enter number 2, enter number 2, and then I use say scanf, right? Quotation t, and then n%, say marks index is 1, index is 1, right? And then next message, say this message, enter number 3, say scanf, right? D, n%, say marks. So that is the second index. Printf, enter, right? Scanf, right? percentage D, comma, and marks. So that is the third element. Fourth element, that index. Then I say print enter number 5. Number 5. So print. So not the print. So scanf percentage D. Say okay, so likewise we can input values right to the array, right, and then we can print the array indexes, and then we can check that whether those input values are stored, right? So this is the first one, so this is the second one, the third one, fourth. This, and then compile this and run this, right? So let's see, enter number 1, this is 85, and then say 95. Okay, so just made mistake, compile and execute. Say 55, enter, and then 65, enter. Say 85, enter, and then say 95, then say 95, enter, and then say 100. Right now you can see those values are stored in my array, right? So likewise we can input the value and output values from the array, right? So that's about the input and output element from an array, right? From here, all right, so from here, so when you output array elements, right, so now you can see, right, so in here the same statements are repeated, same statement is repeated, right? So only this index is changed. The only thing is this index number is changed, 0 1 2 3 4. So assume if you have an array with 100 elements, all right, so if you have array with 100 elements, that means index starting from 0 to what is the final element, last element is 100 element, so that is the index number 99, indexing from 0 to 99, number of elements are 100, right? So when you output those kind of array values, right? So no need to write this, repeat the same statement again and again, right? So if you want to repeat the same thing again and again in programming, we have a systematic way to do that. That is use an loop. That is use a loops. All right. So we can use repetitive control structures. All right. Repetitive control structure. That means we can use loop. Right. So for example, we can use for loops, right? So in here, so this is my array. So there are 5 elements, index starting from 0 to 4. So in here, I use a for loop, all right? So loop goes from I0 to I less than 5, or we can say I less than or equal 4. Then I increment by 1 by 1. Then we can print general statement as a general statement. So this is the data type of the array element, and then we can say marks I. So for the first iteration, I is 0, and then I increment by 1. Then I is 1, then I increment by 1. I is 2, then I increment by 1. That is I is 3, then I increment by 1. I is 4, then output 4, and then 4 increment by 1. That is 5. 5 less than 5 is false. Then out from the loop. So the loop is terminated, right? So likewise, we can easily print the values by using the array, right? So let's see that, right? So in here, I enter these values, and then here I print those values. So I take the same source code and then save as a fifth program 5.c, and then if you want to do the same thing by using an array, right? So how can we do that, right? So in here we can use say for loop, right? So in here say int I. So especially in C program, when you use variables, you have to declare at the beginning. I use say int I, right? So in here, I initialized by 0, and then I less than. So if you want, you can say less than or equal, right? So I use to say I less than 5, or you can use I less than or equal 4, and then I increment by 1, right? So I remove this. Yeah. Before that, I'll demonstrate it. All right. Then within the loop, I can say the value of I is change from 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, likewise. And then I can print those values like this, right? Percentage D slash N. And then here you can say marks. Instead of specifying index, I can put I. All right. Okay, then just compile and then right. Then enter number 1 is 50, enter number 2, 55, 65, let's say 75, and then 80. All right. So in here, those numbers can be out. All right. So then these codes are can be replaced by using this loop. All right. Then the same thing can be done, right, for this one, right? So in here also the value of index or the index number is changing, right? So in here, generally we can say message is enter number. If you want, and later on you can change this number 1, 2, 3, something like that, right? So let's see how to replace this set of codes by using an loops, right? So I'm going to explain that one in here, right? So in this slide, that part is there, right? So in here, we take numbers from 1 by 1 and then print using array, right? So rather than doing that, so we can use loops for input values, right? So I'll demonstrate it. Let's see, that is the easiest way, all right? So then I save this one as a sixth.c, sixth.c. All right. So this set of codes can be replaced by using another loop. All right. So I use a loop variable as j. All right. So how can we change this? Right. So how can we replace this? So I use the for loop. So starting j from 0 to here, I need the numbers from 0 to 4. That is I less than 5. I less than 5. And then j increment 1 by 1. All right, like this. So then the output message is enter number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so I take this message. So just I copy this. All right, I copy this. So in here, index of this value of j changing from 0 to 4. Then we need starting from 1. How can we replace this? So this is integer value. I put d, right? So in here, within bracket, I use say j plus 1, all right? Because j is starting from 0. Then for the first iteration, j is 0, then 0 plus 1 is 1. Then the final, the last iteration, j is 4. Then here 4 plus 1 means 5. Likewise, we can replace these statements. So these statements by using loop. All right. So I just comment it. I comment like this. And then I replace this set of codes by using particular loop. All right. Then how to this scanf function, right? Just I copy this statement, right? And then scanf, then format is integer, then index starting from 0 to 4. Then I put j because within this loop, j goes from 0 to 4, right? So this set of codes can be replaced by using this particular loop. All right. Then I compile this, right? I compile this. So and then compile, and then I run this. Okay, I have compiled this. Okay, then now you can see it, right? Enter number 1 starting from 1. Then enter number 2, 64. Enter number 3, enter number 5. Let's see, say 25, and then say 35. And number 6. So here 55, and the number 7, 95, right? And the number 97. So something wrong with this loop, right? So in here, yeah, I put this here. It should be not j less than 5, j less than 5, right? I compile this, and then I run this, right? Right. So likewise, these set of codes can be replaced by using a loop, right? So by using a loop, we can input numbers to the array, right? So I'll compile, and then I execute this, right? Like this, right? So in here, it says the number 1, right? So I'll input say 50, and then I'll input say 65, 85, all right, say 95, and 100 for the number 5, right? So then we can have an output of this array, right? So likewise, by using an array, or by using a loop, we can input numbers to the array, and then we can get output from the array, right? So then it will be very easy than typing the same statement again and again, right? So without repeating the same statement, so we can input uh, values and output values, right? To the array and from the array, right? So okay, so that's about the usage of loops in uh, arrays, right? Okay, then the final one, that is processing array elements using loops, right? So processing array elements using loops, right? So this is my array, right? So again, I use the same array called marks, right? So which contain 5 elements, right? 50, 60, 40, 35, and 60, right? So now what I'm going to do, I want to take the summation of these values, right? So I want to get the total of these values, right? So in order to do that, right, so I create two variable, right? So integer I, and then sum, which is from the integer data type, and then I initialize the variable sum by 0, right? And then by using loop, I access these elements, right? So now you know here the index starting from 0, and then since there are 5 elements, the last index is 4, right? So then we can define an array, we can define a loop. So by using another any variable. So in here I use the I for controlling iterations, right? So I starting from 0, and then I goes to 4. Therefore, I put this control statement as I less than 5, and then I increment by 1, right? So for the first statement, right? So for the processing, or take the summation of these values, I use say marks I means this iterative control. That is, first time I is 0, then the access marks 0 index, right? So that means first element 50, and then I if it is first iteration, right? So if it is first iteration, mark 0 is 50, 50 added to the sum, the current sum, or the initial sum is 0, then 50 plus 0 is 50. For the second iteration, now the current value of sum is 50. For the second iteration, I is 1. Then marks I means 60. 60 added to the current sum. Current sum is 50. So likewise, we can do this processing. So after the this loop, we can output the value of sum. Right. So I'll demonstrate this by using a flow chart. Right. So in here, so initial processing is say assign 0 to sum and 0 to variable I. So this is my array, right? So array name is marks, right? So these are the array elements, right? And then initial sum is 0, initial I is 0, right? So then, so for explaining this, I use this table, right? So in here, I mention the variable I. So the I for controlling iterations, then I less than 5. So that is the control of this loop. And then this is the statement of this inside the loop, right? So marks ith index added to the variable sum. So after this processing, after this addition, this the summation assigned to the variable sum, that variable is there, and then I increment by 1, right? Okay. And I'll start the first iteration, that is I is 0, first iteration of this loop, I is 0, and then goes to this decision making box or decision box, right? So I 0, 0 less than 5, 0 less than 5 is true, right? So since this is true, then go to the processing a statement, right? So here mark 0 is 50, or here the marks 0 because I is 0, right? I is 0, since I is 0, marks 0, then the zeros index is 50, then the initial sum is 0, 50 added to 0, 50 plus 0 is 50. All right. So in here, after this statement, sum is 50, or the value 50 is assigned to the variable sum. And then I increment by 1, I increment by 1. So currently I is 0, then after increment by 1, that is 1. Right. So then I goes to the next iteration, and next iteration I is 1, then y 1 less than 5, 1 less than 5 is true, right? Again, that is true. And then marks I. I is 1. So that is the our first index, that is the second element, which is 60, which is 60. All right. And then current value of sum is 50, 60 plus 50. And then 60 plus 50 is 110, 110 assigned to the variable sum, right? So 110 assigned to the variable sum, that is 100, sum is 110. And then I increment by 1, I increment by 1, which is 2, right? Which is 2. Then goes to the next iteration. In next iteration, I is 2. Then the decision making box, or the this if statement, or this decision controller is I less than 5. Current value of I is 2. 2 less than 5 is true, right? 2 less than 2 is, sorry, 2 less than 5 is true, right? So then go to the processing box, right? So now I is 2, then marks 2, the second index, which is third element, which is 40, which is 40, and then 40 plus to the current sum, the current value of the sum variable, right, which is 110, 110. Then 110 plus 40 means 150, 150 assigned to the variable sum, right? So then variable sum is assigned by the value 150, or in other words, 150 assigned to the variable sum, right? So after the second iteration, the variable sum contains the value 150, and then I increment by 1, right? So current value of I is 2, then after increment by 1, which is 3, right? Then go to the next iteration. In next iteration, the condition is 3 less than 5, because I is 3. Then 3 less than 5 is true, true, right? So since this is true, it goes to the processing box, right? So in processing box, marks I plus sum. Now I is 3, right? So marks third index, that is 35. Third index means fourth element, right? So 35 plus current sum, or the current value of sum. The current value of sum is 150. Then 35 plus 150, which is 185. 185 assigned to the variable sum. Now the sum contains the value 185. After that, I increment by 1, right? Then I will become 4, right? I will become 4. Then goes to the next iteration, which is 4 less than 5, 4 less than 5. So that is true, that is true. Then goes to inside the loop, inside the loop. So inside the loop, the processing statement is marks I plus sum. Again, marks I means marks fourth index. Fourth index means 60. That is 60. 60 plus the current value of the sum 185, 60 plus 185, which is 245. Then 245 assigned to the variable sum, right? So after the fourth iteration, right? So the in other words, the I equal 4, right? So in this iteration, the sum contains the value 245. Then I increment by 1, which is 5. 5. Then uh, I equal 5. In next iteration, 5 less than 5. 5 less than 5 is false. 5 less than 5 is false. That is, loop is terminated. Loop is terminated. So then since I less than, so I is 5, 5 less than 5 is false, then loop is terminated. Then goes to the next statement of the program, which is print sum. Print sum. Now the value of the sum, variable sum is 245. So 245, value of I is 5. Then once if you output the variable sum, then output is 245, right? So likewise, we can use loop processing array elements. Can use loops for processing array elements, right? So we can write this program in Div C++ software, right? So first of all, I'll include the header file, say standard input output header file, and then I'll create the main function. Declare the main function, and then first of all I'll declare a variable that I need, say I int I, and then variable sum is 0, right? And then I declare my array, right? So array is say int marks. So within square bracket, I would say size is 5. So without defining size, I can just assign values, right? So I put say 65. So I just put some random values rather than the values which are in this presentation. All right. Okay. And then I declare declare the loops, right? So I use I starting from 0 because array index starting from 0. Then I less than 5 because there are 5 elements. So 0 to 4 is enough, right? So then I increment by 1, right? So inside the loop, I use the statement called say sum. Initial sum is 0. Add two elements of marks, right? So inside the array, I goes from 0 to 4. Then I use say marks I, right? Then all the elements can be accessed by using marks I inside the loop, right? Then this is assigned to the variable called sum, right? Then the statements assign say marks I to the variable sum, right? Then marks I to the sum called assigned to the variable sum. Then after the loop, I can print the value of sum, right? And then here I put output of the variable sum, right? Then I save this one as say seventh program, right? So I save this one as 7.c, right? And 7.c, all right? And then I compile this, and then I can run it, right? Now you can see the total of these values are 340, right? So which is different from my presentation. So if I need, I can put these values, the exact the values which are used in my presentation, all right? So in here in my presentation, I use the values from say 50 to 56, those values. So I can replace these values from the values which are used in my presentation, and then I compile the same program and execute. So you can see the total is 245. Okay, likewise, we can use loops for processing array elements. All right, so you can practice these things. So later on, I'll upload an assignment, right? So on this section, right? So you can do those programs, and then you will realize the usage of these arrays, and then especially how to use loops with the array. Okay, thank you everyone.